Guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Today we're going to be working on this holographic butterfly / pastel rainbow / rhinestone tumbler. I'm very excited about this one. My friend Alyssa from Paint Between Dreams actually drew this butterfly print, and I've been sitting on this for like months and months and months because I wanted to make the perfect cup and I was just too afraid to use it, so I've just been hoarding it. So I decided after I saw my friend Mal from Made by Mal use this little hack that I was gonna finally use this print. So this holographic rainbow print is from Banff Custom Creations, and even though it's considered vinyl, the texture of it is like a super thin cellophane, and so it's hard to work with. And last week Mal posted a little hack of double layering vinyl, and I was like, you know what, that is absolutely genius. I'm gonna put this on white backed vinyl and then I can finally freaking use it. So here we are. So what I'm doing, I'm just taking the holographic vinyl and I'm using the hinge method. I did make sure to tape down my Cricut mat just so it wasn't going to move. It did move a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that I had one shot, and I wanted to make sure that I nailed it applying this holographic vinyl to the white vinyl. So taped that in place so it didn't shift. When I used the hinge method to apply it, I didn't focus on the left and the right sides of the vinyl. I just focused on the center because I figured I could push the air bubbles out from the center to the sides and then kind of press it down like I'm doing now. And the other thing to kind of set myself up for success while I was doing that, instead of pulling the vinyl off of the cutting mat, I flipped it over and I peeled the mat from the vinyl. So I'm just really trying to prevent any sort of lifting or separation between the two layers of vinyl. And then once I had that all trimmed down, I'm going to use my Cami Page Boutique tool to create a straight vertical line. And again, we're going to use the hinge method. This time we're removing the backing from the white vinyl, and I'm using a dry erase marker to create that straight line. I'm just going to apply the vinyl directly below that whiteboard marker line that I created, and then once it's applied straight, I'm just going to wipe that off. Once my seams meet up, I'm going to kind of pull the top and bottom taut. You don't want to pull it too much because it's going to end up ripping. And once that's pulled around the edges on both the top and the bottom, I'm going to score the seam where those two pieces of vinyl overlap. We're going to trim up the top and bottom with the X-Acto knife so it's able to lay flat on the cup edging tool. And then once we've got that all edged on the top and bottom, we're gonna cut that seam down the center, and we're gonna move into our next stencil steps. So originally I had planned on actually striping this out with like horizontal stripes and ombreing those stripes, but I remembered that I had this wavy line template from Ellie's Crafty Co, I believe is what it's called. And I was like, you know what? That goes more with like the whimsical butterflies and the holographic. This is giving like fairy vibes, and I don't know if it's like the holographic or the stone colors of the opals. I don't know, maybe the color palette. I don't know what it is. But I was like, this seems more, it just flows with the design better. So what I did, I cut out a stencil. I cannot talk today. And I laid that down over the vinyl. Had I planned on doing the wavy lines to begin with, I would have just cut the vinyl out in a wave, but because it was already applied, there was no going back. So I just used my stencil vinyl and I placed that on the tumbler. So I wanted to show you, I did it two different ways. The first portion of the stencil, I did it in a hinge method fashion. The second one, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna lay this by hand. This is probably way easier. And it was. So when I first laid it down, the waves were too smushed together and it didn't give enough of a wave for a pastel rainbow. So I pulled that off and then I backed that stencil up so they overlapped. And basically anywhere that the stencil overlapped, I cut it out so the wave was continuous on both sheets of vinyl. And then it gave more real estate for the glitter portion, and I just kind of trimmed around it. So it was a lot of extra work. I did it really backwards, but the reasoning behind that is because I originally planned to do those stripes. So adjust that if you plan on recreating this. I would definitely not take the hard way like I did. But if you find yourself in a similar situation, there's always a way around it. So I will let this play through and then I'm gonna let you guys watch me do my very first painted ombre. It was storming out real hard when I filmed this, and so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go out of my comfort zone and I'm going to hand paint with acrylic paints and ombre for this so I don't have to wait for it to stop raining. So you'll see me struggle. It's definitely not perfect. It doesn't need to be. The only thing that I will say is if you are hand painting a rainbow or ombreing anything with like hand painted acrylics and you're using a light color, the yellow really stuck out. There's kind of a harsh line there. I tried to blend it as best as I could. If you guys do that, just be mindful that light colors, like light glitter colors, definitely show the base underneath them. So just be cautious and try to blend as well as possible. I also forgot to mention that I did intentionally place that stencil directly over the seam of the vinyl, so it looks 98% seamless, but if you're cutting a wave line in the vinyl to begin with, that's not going to be relevant in your situation. I took that same dry erase marker and I just kind of mapped out on the stainless where I wanted each color to start and stop and blend. That's just to ensure that each glitter has about the same amount. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just to make sure it has about the same amount of real estate, I guess I would say, to showcase that specific color. And I did start with my lightest color first because I knew it was going to need a couple of coats, and so I let that dry and just kind of went back to it over and over again just to make sure that it didn't show the stainless through there. So I'm going to let this run through and I will see you guys once we're ready to glitter. Once the acrylic paint was dry, I went in with the epoxy method to glitter this. I did use a little bit more epoxy than normal. That was just to ensure that while I was laying the glitter down, I was able to create that fine-tuned blend that I like to do when I do ombres. Now, with this, we are going to go in about 3 sections. So the first one is just to create a map of where I want each glitter to lay, like we did with the paints, where they would blend and overlap. The second one is going to be a little bit more full coverage to make that blend better. And then the third one is going to be the fine glitter that's going to fill in any spaces that the chunky didn't get into. So normally when I do like a 2 or 3 color ombre, I have my cup tilted at probably somewhere between like a 75 and 85 degree angle. With this one, because we don't want, say, the purple cascading down into the yellow, we're going to angle it at probably like a 55 degree angle, if that makes sense, not to get too technical, but we just don't want to tip it so far that one color is cascading way down into the other color. We only want it to blend into its neighbor. And so I'm just going to be very mindful of that when I'm tilting the cup, and I'm also going to make sure that I'm tapping off the colors after they've been laid down. That's just going to prevent any cross-contamination into your glitter shakers. And then once we've got full coverage on here, we're just gonna go back in, full coverage with the chunky, we're gonna go back in with the finer cuts of those glitters and just make sure that we have a very good blend going between each neighboring color. Once we've got the glitter where we like it, we're going to immediately pull any tape around that rim, top and bottom, and immediately remove the stencils. Just to be careful when you're picking the stencil up. If you're using an X-Acto knife or some sort of a sharp tool, just make sure that you're not poking too far down and poking that holographic glitter. If you do poke anywhere in the holographic butterfly section, it's going to be very noticeable. Holographic vinyl is not forgiving at all. So be mindful of that when you remove that tape. We're gonna let that sit overnight to dry, and then we're gonna spray seal the heck out of that thing tomorrow. I sprayed 3 pretty hefty coats of polyacrylic over top of that glitter just to make sure it didn't shift into vinyl sections once we go to epoxy. And then I did paint some white acrylic paint into the base of this tumbler to base paint this white glitter. If you've not seen me remove the butts on the Tipsy Magnolia tumblers, I do have videos back that I will link in the description box showing you how I did that. And then we're gonna go in with some UV epoxy into the center and the outer cavities. Now, we don't want a lot. I'm talking like a couple of milliliters of this glitter because we're going to rhinestone this, and if you fill this cavity too full, it's going to obviously raise the level of epoxy, and then when you go to rhinestone on the base of this, your cup's not going to lay level. It's going to be, the rhinestones will be protruding from the cavity. So we want to make sure this is just going to be a base of the rhinestone. It's not really going to show through, but we're using an opal or a translucent rhinestone, and so we want to make sure that we're not putting stainless under that, otherwise it's going to shift the color of the rhinestone. Once the UV resin was cured, I'm going to use my acrylic logo tag from Mizzy's Doodles and use UV resin again just to adhere that into place. And I'm going to use the Aurora transparent stones from Flynn Sisters Supply Shop in size SS16 to fit on this outer ring. And then in the center, I'm going to use the scatter method, just with all varying sizes of stones. I will show you guys that in the next clip and what sizes I used. And just a side note, I did use UV resin to adhere the stones. Normally I use glue, and I cannot think of the name of the glue at this moment. I will link it in the description. But I did use UV resin because I knew that the transparent stones, when I put the UV light over them, it would be able to penetrate through the stone and cure it. Whereas if you're using like a darker rhinestone or like it's got like a backing on it to prevent it from, you know, color from showing through, those aren't going to cure as well. So I just used a teeny tiny bit of UV resin to apply this. If you're working on this near a window, please don't. The sun will cure your epoxy while you're rhinestoning. I didn't do it on this one, but I have done it before. So just be careful of that. And I'm gonna let this play through again, like I said before, and I'll see you in the next clip. For my first coat, I used about 30 mLs of Flynn Sisters regular setting epoxy, and even though I did spray seal the glitter, it's just a habit of mine, I did put the epoxy on the vinyl first, just in case there was any shifting in the glitter, that it wouldn't be on the vinyl. If you're not very good at sealing the glitter, or if you don't seal your glitter, I would definitely recommend putting it on the vinyl first. It will probably still shift, but it's not going to be as bad. So I'm going to apply that, and I didn't obviously epoxy the base because we've got the rhinestones. And so what I did, I took a baby wipe and kind of steadied my hand on the center cavity of that base, just letting it spin on the turner so it created a straight flush line on that bottom rim. And then we're going to do the same thing the next two coats as well, just making sure there's no epoxy kind of spilling off the edge or anything like that around the rim. So I did 3 coats of epoxy. I did sand between each coat, and then once I had that final coat applied and cured, I went through and rhinestoned this. This is sped up to about times 1,000. It's really sped up. I'm sorry for your eyes. But it took about 45 minutes to line all these stones. I just put on a YouTube video made by Mal's got a Mother's Day series going on right now, so I just played that while I was rhinestoning this to keep myself occupied. I used size SS16 to line along the vinyl and glitter wave there. In hindsight, I would have used probably an SS10, maybe 6 if you like smaller stones. By the time I realized that they were a little bit big, I decided I was just going to leave them because the glue was dried and we were not about to go down that road. So we just left it. It looks fine. I love the final design. Everything's fine. In addition to that, I went in with my teeny tiny SS6 stones, just a couple of them here and there to give a little pop to the vinyl section. Just added a couple of those rhinestones, maybe like 10 over the entire wave section of that vinyl, and then I let that sit overnight to cure. Now, even though they feel dry to the touch, I would leave them and not wash them for, I would say, at least 24 hours. Mine, I wash after about 24 hours if I'm keeping them. If it's something I'm giving to somebody, I usually wait about 48 hours. So once that was all cured and the stones are washed up and the wax was removed from the stones, this cup was completely finished. Here's the final design. I hope you guys loved this tutorial. I had a ton of fun making this. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're not already. Hit that bell button for notifications on future tutorials. If you'd like to join my makers group, that is free of charge. I'll link that in the description, and I will see you guys next weekend.